When William worked in Santa Fe Springs, California back in the 90s, he told me that he thought the building he worked at was haunted. "It really is," said William. "I have had more than a few incidents happen to me while I was working alone, late at night," he continued. William was working as a manager for a very busy chemical distribution company at the time. In order to keep up with his work, he sometimes had to work at night or go in on weekends to catch up with his paperwork. William was a sensible man. He was not the type of person that would fly off the handle in troubling situations. He was always very calm and composed. This is what made his story believable. I knew he wasn't the type to make things up. One night, William went to work after dark and thought nothing of it. His former manager had told him that he might hear some weird noises coming from the warehouse, but it was only the 55-gallon drums expanding and contracting. During the heat of the day, the drums would expand, and at night, when it cooled off, the drums would contract, sometimes making a sound. William was not worried. That night, he was sitting at his desk when he heard what sounded like someone knocking on the door leading to the warehouse. William dismissed it as a drum popping and ignored it. A few moments later, the sound was back, and this time it was louder. Since there was no one else in the building, he became a bit nervous, but continued working. Soon the noises got louder and louder. The final straw was when he heard someone walking above the ceiling to his office. This scared him quite a bit, but again he ignored it. Finally, it happened again, and this time, William ran into the warehouse to look above his office, but no one was there. After that, William never worked at night again. Jerry was 17 when his family decided to move out of their apartment in the city of Riverdale. They had lived there for nearly 10 years. In those 10 years, Jerry had made dozens of friends from around the city. He didn't understand why they had to move. Jerry wished he could stay behind while his family left to Arizona. He knew things weren't ever going to be the same if he left Riverdale, California. "Why do we have to move?" Jerry would ask, sounding depressed. His parents had answered that question countless times already. Despite knowing the answer, Jerry was reluctant to believe it. So he kept asking, "Why do we have to move?" Jerry asked time after time. The simple truth was that Jerry and his family could just not afford to live in Riverdale any longer. It was hard for Jerry to accept that truth. On the day before the move, Jerry walked around the familiar places in Riverdale. He walked passing the oak tree where he first kissed a girl. He walked past the corner mini market where he would bring back milk every Sunday. He passed by his high school where he had learned and discovered his love for math and science. Jerry knocked on the doors of his friends' houses to say one final goodbye. "Goodbye, Tom," Jerry told his best friend. "Goodbye, Jane," Jerry told his girlfriend. The night fell when Jerry finally finished bidding his farewells to everyone he knew. "Goodbye, Riverdale," Jerry said, looking out of his bedroom window as he went to sleep. That night, Jerry dreamed of moving to Arizona and making friends on the first day there. Everything in Arizona seemed great in his dream. The following morning, when he awoke, Jerry no longer felt so bad about moving. "Everything is going to be all right," Jerry said to himself as he stepped into the moving van on his way to Arizona. Joel had been working at a bookstore for 4 months. Although 4 months might seem like a long time, Joel felt like it had only been 1 month since he was hired. Working at a bookstore was a dream job for Joel. He couldn't believe he got hired on the day of his interview. Joel felt grateful to be working at where he was. He loved to brag all about his job to his friends and family. Joel loved reading books on his spare time. His favorite author was Mark Twain. Joel's most beloved book of his was The Adventures of Huckleberry Finn. Working at a bookstore not only gave Joel access to books, but allowed him to interact with other fellow bookworms. Joel often would recommend books to customers, and customers would do the same for Joel. Every now and then, he would come across a classic book and take it for himself to read. Joel's manager allowed him one book for free once a week. It was difficult to decide which book to take sometimes. Joel was getting paid $300 every 2 weeks. Sometimes he would surpass this amount when he worked overtime. After a couple of months, Joel had saved up enough money to finally purchase his first car. Buying a car was the main reason Joel wanted to start working. He began shopping online for used vehicles. Joel already knew what kind of car he wanted. He had first seen a picture of it in a magazine, and since then had dreamed of owning one of his very own. His dream car was a 1984 BMW. Joel wanted a black one with 2 doors. He would search on the internet until he finally found it. Joel could not believe when he discovered a seller with the car. Learning to drive seemed scary for Joel at first. He had recently purchased his first car, which was now sitting on his driveway, looking clean and shiny. The previous owner had maintained it for years and had spent a lot of money restoring it to its original condition. The car was a BMW, made in the year 1984. It was black and had only 2 doors. The interior was also black and had leather seating. The vehicle looked practically new to Joel, despite it being older than the new owner of it. Joel was eager to start driving his new car. At 21, Joel had felt the need to be driving already. He was attending college in the city of Los Angeles, working at a bookstore in the city of Montebello, and living in the city of Bell. Having a car would make traveling much more convenient. Joel had been getting around by means of public transportation. He was ready to stop taking the bus to school and work. The first thing Joel had to do was go to the DMV to register the car under his name. After that, he took a driving manual book from the DMV to study for the written test. Passing the test was the only way to get a driving permit. Joel studied for a few days and passed his test. With the permit in hand, Joel next had to find someone to teach him how to drive. Joel already knew who to ask for driving lessons. "If I'm going to teach you how to drive, you're going to have to commit 100%. Do you understand?" Joel's uncle asked him. "Yes, sir," responded Joel. After a month full of trial and error, Joel finally learned how to drive his car. Although it was scary at first, driving eventually became easy enough for Joel. Do you believe in ghosts? Alvin asked his brother Levi one night as they were lying down in bed around 11 at night. "I don't think so," Levi replied. Alvin and Levi shared a room together. "Why not?" asked Alvin. "I have never seen one," Levi said. Alvin was 12 years old and Levi was 18. "I think I saw one, Levi," Alvin told his brother, sounding frightened. "Go to sleep, Alvin," Levi told his brother as he turned around in his bed to face the closet. "There's no such thing as ghosts," Levi said. Alvin and Levi were lying on separate beds. Levi had fallen asleep half an hour ago, but Alvin was still awake. He was having a hard time trying to go to sleep. A sound was keeping him awake. It sounded like someone was walking out in the hallway, right outside of his bedroom door. It was completely dark. Alvin was curious to find out who was sauntering out in the hallway. 15 minutes had passed and the creaking hadn't stopped. Alvin slowly rose from his bed. He moved towards his door, taking one step every 2 seconds. He finally reached his door. He put his hand on the doorknob and gradually began to turn it. The walking had not ceased. "Alvin, what are you doing?" Levi said right before Alvin could open the door. "I think there's a ghost in the hallway," Alvin replied. Levi rose to his feet and went to the door. "I'll go with you," Levi said. The two opened the door and popped their heads out the door to take a look. You see, it was nothing, Levi said. Alvin and Levi went back to bed. Levi again fell asleep before Alvin. Alvin could not go to sleep. There was something walking in the hallway.